Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. In our first story, you'll find out what happens when a micromanaging first sergeant pushes his soldiers one power trip too far. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. First sergeant orders literal grass cutting, gets exactly that. This is some good old-fashioned following orders to F with leadership. In 2012, I was stationed at Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, assigned to a battalion headquarters company comprised of the leftovers of other units. Essentially, theater-level brass decided this unit just had to exist. The units below us ignored us whenever possible and functioned better before they had to deal with our completely incompetent level of bureaucracy, and requisitioned a bunch of sergeants and officers from units that were above minimum staffing requirements. You can imagine the types of leaders these units decided they could do without. Take all those officers and sergeants and create a new mega-concentrated bullcrap toxic leadership structure out of them. Sprinkle in some hapless privates and a bit of good leadership that just got unlucky enough to be assigned to Hawaii as the unit was being stood up. Now, I was pretty gung-ho, hoo-ah, if you will. I wanted to excel as a soldier, so if I was assigned a task, I generally executed as thoroughly as possible with intent in mind. For the majority of my time in the unit, my immediate supervisor was a salty old sergeant who, despite his long years of service, had screwed up here and there and would forever remain a simple E5, the lowest-ranking sergeant. We'll call him Sergeant Sensible, and he was. Counter to my experience with most leadership in this unit, his decision-making was based on how to complete tasks and take care of soldiers, as opposed to the usual cover your butt or lacking that blame the nearest soldier with a rank lower than yours, generally employed by officers and sergeants alike. So this particular incident begins with our first sergeant, in charge of managing the enlisted personnel in the unit, deciding that some quality training was in order. To him, this meant loading up the hodgepodge of gear our dysfunctional supply office had managed to scrounge or acquire, firing up a bunch of Humvees, and sitting in some fields with no particular tasks or objectives. So we're out there sitting. Radios are working, whatever gear we have is set up, and there's nothing left to do. Most every officer and sergeant in the unit has furnished one excuse or another, so Sergeant Sensible is the only leadership around. It gets to be about 2 p.m. and we decide some food's in order. Of course, supply skipped out on the exercise, and only they are allowed to access the MREs that we don't have. So Sergeant Sensible decides we'll have ourselves a convoy down to the gas station to pick up some grub. Well, apparently, First Sergeant showed up shortly afterwards to show off how hard his unit was training to some, top brass Fs who he cared to impress. Doesn't matter. When we get back, he tears into us, and Sergeant Sensible in particular, about how our job is not to interpret orders, only execute. That means if the order does not involve food, we do not get to decide that food is involved. Discipline and the chain of command is how the Army operates, and we're the reason this unit is so effed up. Here's where the fun begins. Some morning later in the week, First Sergeant decides the grass in the motor pool is too long. He's indisputably right. We shared it with another unit, and they knew their leadership didn't give a crap, so all they had to do was wait for us to get assigned to it. First Sergeant's pissed about something else and issues the order, no one leaves until all of the grass is cut, and promptly bounces. So we look around for the grass cutting equipment. There is none. The company took it all down to their range earlier in the week. Now, the motor pool isn't huge, but we're talking about 3-foot-tall grasses at the edges and a solid foot where there isn't pavement. We number about 6, Sergeant Sensible and a smattering of privates. This is where I should mention that First Sergeant unrelatedly tore into us for using our phones during the duty day. If we have a task assigned, we should not be on our phones until the task is done. Roger that. Sergeant Sensible starts to tell a few of the privates to take a truck and grab the grass-cutting equipment. This is where I pipe up, Sergeant, no one leaves until the grass is cut. He gets the biggest grin. He knows exactly my brand of bullcrap, having to deal with it directly. We all know full well the First Sergeant has a bunch of even less desirable crap he wants us to do back at headquarters. I found a bunch of shovels in the corner and used a bench grinder to create some good edges. That took a good hour or so. After all, a proper tool is key. Then we took our sweet time following all the prescribed work break conditions for heat and humidity and slowly chipped away at the task. By the time we get back to end-of-day formation, First Sergeant realizes we only just got back and starts to light into Sergeant Sensible in front of the whole battalion headquarters. Not actually that big, but does include a major, second in command on the officer side, who's laughing his butt off at the whole affair. FS, Sergeant Sensible, why the F did grass detail take you and 6 others all day? SS, First Sergeant, we had no equipment. No one could leave until the task was done. We had to make equipment. FS, why the F didn't you call the company? SS, First Sergeant, we are not to use our phones until the task is complete. FS, that's bullcrap, Sergeant. You are to accomplish the task implied. SS, First Sergeant, I am not to interpret orders, only execute. Game, set, match. First Sergeant yelled for a bit after that, but not at Sergeant Sensible anymore, just lashing out in general. It was extremely satisfying watching this micromanaging a-hole with no regard for soldier welfare throw a fit in front of everyone. He'd done a decent enough job of fooling what few good leaders we had up until then. After this, his nature was common knowledge and helped neuter some of his unofficial power. The unit still sucked, of course, and anyone with skill or qualifications quickly transferred out when they realized where they'd gotten stuck, so it never improved during my time there. But I remember Sergeant Sensible sticking it to the man quite fondly. I was expecting this to go to an even deeper level. He did say no one leaves until all the grass is cut. Not anything about you having to cut it. Could have waited there until he started wondering where the hell you were. And our second story. 2 for 1. 2 Karens, 1 transaction. Neither of them were the customer I was checking out. Of the 2 Karens in that 1 transaction, I'd seen one before. We shall call her Karen A. Now, I've been at this store, my first job, for a year now. I started last year as we were getting our Halloween stuff in and on the floor. She came in and complained about how she hated Halloween and preferred Christmas. Last year, when I was brand new, she had me lead her around the store to price check everything for her and interrogated me about wearing Halloween pins on my vest, telling me you wouldn't like it so much if the devil possessed you. She ended up getting a witch's hat decoration. I saw her a few more times until after we'd gotten the last of our Christmas out of the store, and I didn't see her again until recently, when our Halloween stuff was being put up again. She comes in and huffed about how we have Halloween already, and asked when Christmas would be in. I told her about when that starts to come in, and she looked at me aghast. We don't have it yet. Then she asked if anyone here could make a wreath for her. I told her, have stocked the stuff to make them, but we don't assemble them for customer as we're a craft store. She insisted someone here can make it, and she's seen a lady make them for people here. I informed her it's not a service the store offers. I then excused myself politely as I'm being called to the register. I begin to check out a polite customer, and while I am, Karen A returns. She nudged the lady I was checking out aside and began to show me pictures of the wreath she wanted and insisted I could take an order for whoever makes them. Then mentioned it was too early for the devil stuff and she hadn't taken her 4th stuff down yet. Then asked me if we still had 4th of July stuff. Seeing the chance to get her out of the way, as any attempt of mentioning that I'm in another transaction fell upon deaf ears, inform her we do, and sent her that way. I resumed checking out the nice customer when Karen B appears not even 3 minutes later. She dropped a bag on top of the nice lady stuff and loudly said, I have a return, and she launched into her complaint. The nice customer looked ready to sink through the floor. I say I can help her next, and I'm required to have a manager present for all returns. She looked very annoyed, but did step back to wait. I radio manager and finally finished the nice lady's transaction. Once a manager got up there, I said, let manager handle the return, and wondered where all the audacity was coming from that day. Karen A may have seen someone holding a class on wreath making. Apparently the dumb butt can't distinguish the difference between a class and someone hired to make wreaths. Distinct possibility she saw it at a different craft store altogether. Would be the first time an oblivious Karen didn't pay attention to where she was. And our last story. Be careful what you wish for. HOA. My friend lived in a beautiful suburban neighborhood, the kind where everything was pristine and organized except for one little thing. The Homeowners Association, HOA, ran the show, and they loved enforcing their strict rules on every little detail. From the type of grass you could plant to the acceptable shade of your front door, nothing was left to personal preference. If you didn't follow the rules, you could expect fines or complaints on your doorstep before you even realized you'd done something wrong. Now, my friend lived in a great spot at the bottom of a hill. His house was the first thing you saw when you drove into the neighborhood. He had a good relationship with the HOA at first. In fact, he got their approval to add a garage to his house, which was a much-needed upgrade. He decided to side it with some beautiful cedar planks, which added a rustic, natural feel to the house. The garage looked amazing. At least that's what my friend thought. It was a unique touch that set his house apart from the rest of the cookie-cutter homes in the area. But of course, the HOA wasn't pleased. One day, they dropped by and pointed out that according to the bylaws, all exposed walls must be painted. It was a rule in place to make sure all the homes had that consistent, polished look. No one could have a raw, natural wood wall staring out at the neighborhood. He wasn't happy about it, but he figured he'd try to appeal the decision. He presented his case, explaining that it added character and charm to his house. Unfortunately, the HOA wasn't having it. They voted unanimously against him and told him to paint the garage or face penalties. But here's where my friend's genius came into play. Rather than accept defeat, he dug deeper into the HOA's rules. As he read through the bylaws more carefully, he noticed something important. While the rules clearly stated that all exposed walls had to be painted, there were no restrictions on what color the paint had to be. There were no rules about keeping it neutral, subdued, or tasteful, just that it had to be painted. That's when he got an idea. Instead of painting his garage a nice beige or gray like the HOA probably wanted, he decided to make a statement. He went out and bought a rainbow of primary colors, bright red, yellow, blue, green, and more. He painted every single plank of his cedar garage a different color, and the result was a full-on, multicolored garage that looked like it belonged in a circus. When the HOA saw it, they were furious. They showed up at his door demanding that he repaint it to something more appropriate. But my friend just laughed and told them that according to their rules, it was perfectly legal. They tried to pressure him into repainting it, but there was nothing they could do. The bylaws had no color specifications, and his house was following the letter of the law, even if not the spirit of it. The HOA was left completely powerless, and my friend enjoyed every minute of their outrage. To this day, he says it was one of the best moments of his life, watching them seethe with frustration while he just sat back grinning. That garage, bright, obnoxious, and proudly colorful, became the stuff of neighborhood legend. The HOA learned a valuable lesson that day. When you make a rule without thinking it through, someone will find a way to make it their own, and sometimes just a little bit of cleverness and a lot of paint can turn a strict rule into the perfect form of revenge. The HOA got exactly what it asked for, just not what it wanted. There's something so satisfying about someone using their own rules against them so cleanly that there's nothing left to argue. Bet they had an emergency meeting the next week to add a 400-page color palette guide. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.